Hello and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's CPD. Today, I'm absolutely, it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be joined by Ben and Elaine. These two colleagues have been doing something really quite interesting in terms of career development and career progression for teachers and leaders. Ben Hobbis is the founder and chair of the StepUp network, and Elaine Hayes works with him as a network lead in the West Midlands. And the aim of today's session really is to give you an insight into the StepUp network, how this network can support you in your career progression, but also how it can help you to start to demystify the journey of career progression. So we're not always clear on what that might look like in our schools. So today's going to be a discussion. We've got some questions, and I know from the people who have signed up to this session that there are classroom teachers out there, aspiring middle leaders, also aspiring senior leaders as well. So we've got a real broad spectrum to kind of cover in today's session. So if you two are happy, I'm going to launch with the first question this afternoon. Can I just ask, why is there a need for the network? You might want to talk about the formation of the network before we answer that one, but why is there a need for the network or a network like this?
I think the way it came about was from my own experience, actually. So I was a classroom teacher, I'm a primary school teacher, was a middle leader in a very small primary school. So, I mean, as teachers, we all wear lots of hats. As leaders, we all wear lots of hats. But in a very small primary school, you end up wearing a lot more hats than probably what you intend to. Mm-hmm. And I had a great development, and it was had fantastic opportunities presented to me, and probably got a lot more opportunities than would have got from being in a larger school. But actually then it was really hard to balance the leadership with the teaching, to be the best teacher you could be the best leader you could be, and then ultimately have your well-being perfect.
Yeah. So it's a compromise.
So I knew that actually when I reached out to other people on Twitter, there were so many other people that felt like that. But I ultimately knew that I really wanted to lead and wanted to continue that, and that to be part of my career in education. But I know that lots of people have sacrificed the leadership part when they'd be fantastic leaders or are fantastic leaders, but they really want to be a teacher, but just can't do the leadership because they just don't have the time or the capacity to. Yeah. And ultimately, we know what teacher retention is like and leadership retention is like. And that's sort of where the network came about, was to empower aspiring and new leaders in education. So we particularly focus on those who are aspiring to or new to a senior and middle level, but we do cover all aspects. We know there will be some people that engage with our network as aspiring middle leaders and might continue to do so until they become a head teacher. And that's sort of why we're here, really, is to empower people to do that and know that they can have a great career, and that career is just one part of their life, and that their well-being and sort of compromise of well-being and diversity and inclusion are key elements of our network as well.
Fantastic, thank you.
I think as well with that, it's looking at giving back. I know in my leadership journey, I've been lucky enough to work with some wonderful colleagues, as Ben has in his leadership journey, that sometimes colleagues aren't as fortunate to have that champion, and there's a huge gap there within the network, which is why I was inspired to get involved with Ben in terms of being a network lead, so that we can pass on what the experiences we had. So I was very lucky enough early on in my career. I was line managed by an assistant principal for teaching and learning in a secondary school, that's now my current job role. So 5 years on from being line managed by her. So it's looking at how we can then use our journeys, our stories, our voices to inspire others, but then facilitate that, because there's so many different ways of getting into leadership. There's never it shouldn't be a straight line path. For a lot of colleagues, it is a straight line path. You go, you start as your teacher, you're second in department, head of department, into leadership. But a lot of the times it actually isn't. It's more of a jungle monkey range.
You
understand the picture. It's a climbing frame, and sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down, and it's it's not always about getting up. It's about sometimes stepping back, but keeping that leadership aspect, because ultimately we're all leaders within our own schools, no matter what we're doing.
Yeah. I think that point about there being a gap, I think, is so important, isn't it? You know, like you, I've been fortunate enough to be on the receiving end of some real high quality leadership, but also some high quality support as a result of that leadership. I always found as a new teacher, it was so easy to look up to those senior leaders and think, oh gosh, I want to be like them one day, or I want to be that person one day, but never really understand how I got into that position. But equally knowing that there probably was like a secret trajectory that I just didn't know about, or that I could just take a stab at. So I think that's really important that this network attempts to do that for colleagues. How do you do that then? How do you achieve goal?
Well, we have what we call them our ways of working. So as a network, we have 5 ways of working. So that's sort of our how. Our why is, you know, the reason why we're here is what we've just talked about in the previous question, is to empower people. We sort of do that through our 5 ways of networking, 5 ways of working that we've created. So our main one is connecting. So our connecting is all about our events and our community. We do plan to launch online regional networking groups. That was one thing people asked for, is to be able to get to network with other people. And it's also a great way, if we do have the online and offline presence, we're sort of being able to connect the dots between events and so on and so forth. One of our other ways of working is sharing. So sharing things like newsletters, blogs. That's a big thing that we've got at the moment. So we try and release a blog every week where we can. And that's just about what anyone wants to write about to do with leadership. So we've got some great blogs on there from people at the moment, and they come out every Wednesday morning. And also our plan is, we've got one of our other network community members, Adam, is planning the launch of a StepUp podcast. So sharing stories, so another way of sharing. We then have our supporting, which is one of our other ways of working. And at the moment on our website, which we can share the details with your colleagues for, we have what's called a leadership directory. So on there's a directory of books, coaches, podcasts, blogs, other networks, where people can go to, that if you don't want to attend an event, or you're not looking to attend an event or do anything like that, that's all there for you. And we hope to add to that section and populate that over time. Collaborating, that's another key part of our work. So working with other organisations or signposting to other networks. So one thing we talked about, obviously, I know that both Elaine and yourself, Tracy, are both involved in Women Ed in some capacity, or have been. And we talked about, as a network committee, we want to act as that signposting point to people. So as well as through our directory that we've got, actually, yes, we're a leadership network, but we don't specialise in, say, a particular affinity group. So like Women Ed supporting women, or BAME Ed supporting BAME. That actually there's other people who are doing such a great job within different spheres. We're not going to duplicate the work, so that we can signpost you to other people. Yeah. And then our final one is networking. So that's more like sort of one being a network and being there, but behind the scenes as well. And one thing that we talked about as a network is networking in education is quite different to networking in any other sector. So we said about, if you're in the private sector and you're working in this office in Canary Wharf in London, and you go into the weekly staff drinks and there's a breakfast, seminar on this. Actually, in education, it is very much a bolt-on, and some people don't engage with it, don't know how to, don't know it's happening. If you're not on Twitter, you might not know it's happening. And actually, to go to a networking event when you're not used to it is really hard, and it can be quite scary. And I think that's why, now that we have things like the ECF in place, which includes termly events where you do network with other people, and there's facilitators there, and the new MPQs, and I know they're only one form of development, but part of that is networking and getting out and about. And we know as teachers, we love to nab ideas from each other and just talk. So those events are great, and that's what we wanted to also do as a network, is change that sort of perception of and emphasize the importance of networking as well. Sorry, Elaine, I realise I've answered that question really.
No, that's fine. I think the networking as well, like when we went into COVID, networking was very, very different. There was a lot of online. We're now getting back to that face-to-face. And I know I've got some colleagues who are on the MPQs. And the one thing they actually said was, oh, we love going to the sessions. That was the best thing about it. They don't like the online sessions. And part of the network is signposting, obviously, our own events that we're going to have. We've got a number of regional events coming up in London. There's one in Manchester. There's one in Birmingham that's very, very soon. I know Ben will signpost in a minute. It's about getting out to those, and it can be very, very daunting, especially for people who are starting out their career, going to an education event. So we're looking at how can we make them as efficient as possible. I know Ben and the other network members have looked at what specifics are people looking for, so that we can try and fill that niche. Because when you look at leadership as a study, there's so much there. There's so much from, and we're not just looking at educational leadership, we're looking at leadership across politics, across, different organizations and different job roles. It's quite a large, vast amount. So like when you're talking about, what kind of leader do you want to be, so that we're helping to kind of signpost some of the best practice. And then that we do have we've had a large number of people come and say, look, we want to write blogs. It's also giving people that opportunity that they mightn't have the technical know-how or the outlet to be able to write their own blog. We say, look, if you're in a leadership role, please come and write for us. So, that you can share your story with others and be inspired, get inspired and be inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those 5 strands that you've just spoken about are just so crucial, aren't they, for anybody who's looking to progress and to move into a different realm of their career, I suppose. Perhaps if we would just take a couple of those to talk about in a little bit more depth and detail. This idea of sharing stories, I think, is probably one of the most powerful things about what StepUp do. I remember as a young middle leader, actually having or listening to somebody who was vulnerable in their leadership and actually being human in their leadership, I found was like a revelation for me. And I thought, oh, you can be human and do this superhuman job at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit more about the stories that you've heard, or any stories that have impacted you personally?
I think our launch event, which you spoke at, Tracy, and obviously me and Elaine co-hosted that, and it was just so I'm not saying this, but it was really inspiring listening to people, because actually one thing that we did for that launch event and for all of our other events is we've never said to anybody, we don't say to people, we want you to talk about this. It's very much, we want you to share something to do with leadership that's really pertinent to you. It might be your own personal experience, or it might be something that you've witnessed, or it might be something that's just important to you. And we've never said to anyone, this is what we want you to talk about. And actually the range of different stories we had there, and particularly for me, from the aspect of diversity. So one of the areas that we address as network is diversity in leadership, or in some cases, lack of diversity in leadership. And hearing some of the stories of what people have had to go through in order to get to where they are now, it was just like, in a way, it was quite upsetting, some of those stories to hear, but also it was something that needed to be heard as well, and that people should listen to. And I think that was something that was really important. And I remember when before we launched the network, and I met virtually with Christala Jamil of Women Ed England, who's a great CEO in London and just a great person. She and I was speaking about something that was personal to me, and she was like, "Oh, you should share that." And I was like, "Oh, why would anyone want to listen to?" She was like, "No," she was like, "because you're one of probably many who've experienced that, and actually, it's okay. Like how you've articulated it to me is how you could articulate it to others." And I think it's just like, one thing we wanted the network to also be is a safe space for people. That yes, there's some. In order to be a leader, actually the best leaders have gone through so many struggles. They've been vulnerable. They've had great successes as well. But actually sharing that, once you've had that time to reflect and to learn, and in some cases heal from it, it actually is really important to share. Elaine?
I think as well, when you look at, there's some really, really inspiring stories and what people had to go through. Leadership can be a very, very lonely position. You're looking around at your leadership team, and you can still talk to them, but when you're in that role, it can be, especially head teachers at the moment, with everything going on, the pressures coming from finance, from government, from Ofsted, the dreaded old word, that those pressures are huge. And sometimes you feel like you're in a vacuum, that it's you on your own. Whereas when we're sharing those stories, and I know for a number of the comments on Twitter following that event, it was it resonated with so many people. And as Ben said about the power of sharing your own personal story, you know, sometimes people think, gosh, no, exactly as Ben said, who's going to listen to that? But people learn from it. And
Yeah.
it's having that avenue. And one of the big things with the network is, like, we didn't say to people, this is what we want you to talk about. We said, come with your story, come with what you've learned. What do you want other people to know and learn? And we learn from others. And I think that's a huge credit to how the network is starting to run. And I'm really looking forward to our face-to-face events and getting that, because obviously our launch event was virtual.
Yeah.
But the face-to-face events and the power and the inspiration that you can get from that, because there are going to be challenging times in education. Education is not the easiest of fields to be working in. And, you know, I'm not, a lot of us are working in really good schools. It can be challenging and lonely. So it gives people that opportunity to come listen to these stories, be inspired, take something from it. And obviously then what we hope to do is that people will go on, have their own leadership journey, come back and give back, so that they come and tell us that, oh, look, I went to this event in Birmingham in October, and this, or then I was inspired to apply for this post. I didn't get it, or I did get it, and they share their journey and success and failures, because you have to learn. I think you learn a lot from where you fail, and if you're able to kind of be able to critically reflect on it, you can learn. And some of the stories that we heard were about failure. Were about how did you pick yourself up after putting yourself. It can be very hard putting yourself out there as well. There's a lot of people are like, how do I put myself out there? How do I, you know, especially when you're looking at the step up from middle to senior, that can be a very daunting prospect.
Yeah.
You know, what support is there for those senior leaders that are new to the role? So it's really making sure that we're inspiring and giving that avenue for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so much of what you've just said has resonated there with me as well. I think that whole point of when you make that transition into the next position, whatever that might be, there's a sense of you feeling you need to play the role, isn't there? There's something quite performative about leadership. And actually that can be quite crippling for some people as well, like feeling that they need to behave in a different way, you know, on the exterior to what's actually happening inside. And the more I've been doing it, the longer I've been doing it, I've realized actually if those two things are more attuned to each other and I'm my genuine self, actually we get better results as leaders. But that's a really hard thing to swallow when you've only just been doing it for a little while, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be very, very difficult, and that step up can be huge. So it's how do we support people to be vulnerable and actually put yourself out there, because some people won't necessarily go for the job, and actually they'd be very, very suited for the job role. Like there was an example of a colleague that I had, that there was a job role came up, and as much as I didn't want to lose her in her current role, I could see that actually that's the progression for her. It turned out when we actually had a conversation, she said, oh yeah, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, something was like, look, the opportunity's there now, go for it and see. And she has been successfully appointed into that position, is doing really, really well. But it's having those people around, or, you know, obviously I was directly involved with that colleague, but sometimes you're able to see it or hear from a colleague, and the face-to-face networking where you can actually say, I have a quick word after a session, and we'll have some post-session events as well. That can be very, very powerful. You know, that conversation. It's a little conversation, but can make a huge difference to somebody in terms of their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've just spoken about there in terms of those connections that you form from sharing stories, that's how you build your networks, isn't it? So those people who've got things in common with you. And suddenly when you're stood up doing that assembly by yourself, you're not by yourself at all. You've got this whole army of people who are there supporting you behind you. Brilliant. Okay. So can I ask you a quick question first of all? We've spoken about the launch event a couple of times, and I know that was a huge, huge success, and a whole range of different speakers from all sorts of different leaders. Is there a way that colleagues could access a recording of that? How would they get hold of that if they wanted to?
Yes, if they just go onto YouTube and type in StepUp Network launch event, and it will be on there. So there's the full event, and it's can be broken down into separate parts, even though it's one full event. And we are in the process of actually breaking it down into each person's smaller talks. So we had about 14, I think, speakers on that event. So there's 14 different talks, all very different as well. So it's definitely checking out.
Yeah, good. So somebody could just kind of have a look through, see what would suit them or resonate with them, and perhaps watch that. I will link that to the to this email that goes out to colleagues, so they'll be able to watch that. Perhaps on the second half of this CPD today would be a really good idea. Okay, that links us quite nicely to how colleagues can get involved. You know, you've spoken here about lots of opportunities for people to get directly involved in the network, maybe by writing a blog or sharing their story. How else could colleagues get involved in the StepUp network?
So engaging on social media, we've got our Twitter page, obviously coming and watching the YouTubes, the videos that are there, the events that are on, they're all listed on the website as well. So come to an event and get involved that way.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And there's also, I mean, opportunities eventually if people want to, you know, speak at events. We always ask and reach out for people. And also to volunteer as a network lead as well. I mean, a lot of the time we've had people sort of off the back of the launch event seeing it and be like, oh, I want to be part of this. Can I help or can I contribute? And it can be as little as, you know, you might just log on to Twitter once a week and help manage our social media, or you might want to go and help organize one of our events. And I mean, we've got a great team as it is, but we know that, you know, with more people, as we are all volunteers, the stronger the network will be, and more of an impact it will have as well.
Yeah, and actually running your own event on the behalf of this organisation would be a really good thing, and empowering for yourself. You probably get more out of it than what you put in, I would imagine. It's that sort of situation. Elaine, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think eventually you're looking at where we'd have a huge presence in different regions. So it's making sure that we're growing. Because obviously this first year, we've discussed the 5-year plan as a regional, as a network committee as well. And, you know, it'd be brilliant to have this kind of step up in every area around the country. And you'd never know, we could end up going international.
Wow, you never know. You never know. I certainly think there would be an appetite for it. You know, having spoken to both of you before, I just think this is such an important thing for people in their career development. And as you alluded to earlier, Elaine, there's too much of a lottery for colleagues who want to move up or to step up into the next role. And this organisation works really hard to kind of bridge the gap between those two things, which I think is really, really powerful. Okay, so let's explore this question then. What advice could you or you as an organisation offer to support staff who are considering career progression?
I think to start with, it's making sure that you're in the right place where you can progress. I think that's another reason why the network is here. Is some people will find themselves potentially in the wrong organisation, or in some cases, it's not that it's the wrong organisation. It might be that you end up in a school where there's not the opportunities, because they might actually have a really good staff retention because of how well the school is run. And actually those opportunities might not come up. And actually the schools that are like that the leadership team will probably know that and will be there to support you in terms of, oh, well, what you're looking for, let us help you. So I think definitely having that conversation, you know, at interview or when you're even looking for a role, and we have got an event purely looking at leadership jobs at middle and senior level and how to apply for them. So that's a really, I think, important place to start. And also, I think you have to be really open to lots of different areas. My current head teacher spoke to me about this when she was having a conversation with me about my leadership journey, and she said, you know, like, I always thought I wanted to be a Senko. And that was at the forefront of my mind. And she goes, and I've never been a Senko, and I probably will never be a Senko. She found that she fell into, which often a lot of people, she became a maths leader, and then she ended up becoming a maths lead practitioner across a group of schools, and that was what she did, and then became a deputy head. And then she did a deputy headship in 3 different schools. And the deputy head of our school was in the room, and he shared his leadership journey, which was totally different to hers. And you've got to be open to different things that you might not necessarily want to lead. There'll be some things that, you know, you might be really adamant you don't want to do, and that's okay. But always consider it. So, like, for me, mine is SEND. I was like, I don't have an interest to become a Senko. That's not something for me. But actually, I do, as a class teacher, find SEND and inclusion quite interesting. So it's probably something I should be a bit more open to. So I think being open to different things and doing a bit of research as well, and just seeing what's out there. There's a lot more out there in terms of development, in terms of types of role. We are in a point where actually, in terms of what are the Department for Education provide in terms of the ECF and the MPQs and all that, actually we've got a very good joint up system now, but there is so much more out there as well. And actually it's about having the confidence to go to your school or to your trust and ask for what support they can provide. So but definitely go out and network as well. It's always good to look beyond your organisation and to speak to people as well, and to ask. I think that's really important.
Yeah, just to pick up on what you said there about sort of MP, the kind of golden thread of the DfE's professional development. I think what's key is how that is translated back into practice, isn't it? And I've met colleagues before who've just thought, well, I'll do that MPQ. As soon as they finish one MPQ, they want to start the next one, and we always dissuade colleagues from doing that, because what this is really about is what your experience teaches you in role. How is your learning made a difference to the children that you're teaching or to your school? And it's those sorts of myths that kind of people need to be busting. And I know that your network definitely does kind of work hard to bust some of those myths for people. But likewise, people's thinking about, I need to be whatever for 5 years before I can even consider. That those are things that have been peddled over time, but we're working in a very different landscape with, like you said, Ben, so many different roles that are varied and exciting now. We've got to think broader than that, haven't we?
I think as well, it's looking at the big question is that people will ask themselves, am I ready for this? Am I ready to take the next step? And sometimes you actually don't know until you go and do it.
Yes.
So it's looking at how could you shadow, as a senior leader, can you get somebody to shadow you? Are there opportunities to be on the senior leadership team as an associate? Can you create those opportunities if they're not there? So one of the phrases I think
could be a good thing to do. Yeah.
One of the phrases I think I used at the launch event was about if bringing a chair to the table. And I said, well, if the table's not there, you need to go and create it yourself. So sometimes it's about having that courage to actually ask the question and say, look, are there those opportunities? And as Ben said, it's being very, very open. It mightn't be it's never always going to be the 100% perfect time.
No.
Or you're never going to be 100% perfect. And also one of the things when you look at a job application, I'll give you my personal one. I looked at my job, applying for the assistant principal role, and I was thinking, oh my God, I can do some of that. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I'm flying with that. These three, no. And I was like, actually, no, do you know what? I'm going to apply for the job.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are dissuaded by the job specifications and they think about what they can't do.
Yeah, and it overshadows
what they can do.
Yeah.
How you look at and how do you best sell yourself? So, like in terms of my leadership journey, COVID was a brilliant thing for me. I know that's a very weird thing to say.
Yeah, I think it did actually.
It gave me a fabulous opportunity. So I was able to take leadership of our online learning, which I absolutely love. Digital learning, I loved looking at what's the best pedagogy online, and that was part of the reason that I could show then that actually I can do whole school. So one of the things in my own journey is I've never been a head of department. I've never had. So the traditional ladder that I had said about, I've actually jumped rungs because I took those opportunities when I saw them. Yes, it can be extra work, and sometimes, but it never felt like a chore. It never felt I was doing something extra, because I knew actually this is kind of where I want to go anyway.
Yes, yeah, and you were learning. I think that's the key thing, isn't it?
Being open to that learning, and the learning, we talk about the golden thread that the DfE have at the moment, but you go onto YouTube and there's so much out there that you can take on. And I think when you look at some of the courses that are offered using the apprenticeship levy, where you have to do the on-the-job experience, a lot of that can be listening to podcasts. It can be listening to CPD like this. It can be listening to the videos that we're doing with StepUp, with other organizations. And it's actually engaging with that. Some people, but why would you? If that's where you really want to be, if you're looking at moving up, you want to be that lifelong learner. There's never a day that I'm going to get to the day that I say, I know it all. That's the day I retire. I'm not even,
If you're anything like me, Elaine, the longer that you're doing it, the more you realise you need to learn. And that's
Yeah.
the joy of it, actually. That's, you know, I think that's so exciting. I'd be worried if a teacher came to me and said, you know, I know it all. There's nothing left, or I've got nothing to take from this, you know. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I think I've probably taken enough of your time today. There are so many great ideas here, but I think a few of them would include a few next steps for those people that are watching. And I know that the website is full of lots of resources, particularly that leadership directory that Ben spoke about earlier. And I think actually those of you who are watching this really considering some aspect of career progression, that'd be a really good way to spend the next 20 minutes or so, is going through that, engaging with some of the stories and the blogs that are on that website, and looking at how that signposts you to your next bit of support. Can I just say, I know it was a huge ask to get both of you here on an evening to speak to me today. So a huge thank you. And I know the colleagues that are watching this and the wider kind of Step Up community are going to benefit so much from your brilliant work. So thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us, and look forward to Mercy and Trust colleagues engaging with StepUp.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.